All right, seeing none, let's move to second semester school culture reports. John Passarella and your team, you want to come on up?
John Passarella, David Sibley is our Dean of Students, and Neil DeGetti is our Assistant Dean. Neil is a full-time teacher, and he receives a stipend to assist in the Dean's office on his prep periods and at school events. He has his Type 75 administrative certificate. These three gentlemen have done a great job for us in the last 2 years that I've been present, and their data tonight that they're going to discuss will represent that. We also had some other issues throughout the school year. One in particular was last fall when we lost a student in an accident, and the community, I received several phone calls and emails from the community talking about the support that was provided by Mr. Passarella and his staff to some of those students as they were dealing with the grieving process. So, John, take it away.
First, I appreciate it, Dr. Skinkis. To begin with, I want to thank the board for allowing the office an opportunity to really show someone other than myself that represents those who are doing grunt work behind the scenes. And as far as the students are concerned, they're not behind the scenes, but oftentimes it's me who's so-called representing the office, and it really isn't. It's so much bigger than just myself. School culture can't be captured in data. It's well beyond that. It's a feeling. It's an environment that is only known by those who live in it, the students and the staff. And so we'll look at data, and I appreciate having an opportunity to share that. But the culture goes well beyond what I can put on paper, well beyond what an increase or a decrease in some percentage or suspensions. The situations Dr. Skinkis speaks of early in the year, the loss of a student, goes well beyond to say that a office assisted with that. It's the school, it's the teachers. And I need to take a moment to share that with you, though I know you know that. Those looking in might only look at and read data, and I know the 7 of you sitting there know there's more to it than that. It's a family feeling that you care genuinely about those individuals, those stakeholders that are given to you as gifts from those families. So as we sit here and talk about data, the challenges that we face with our students are the same challenges each of us faces in our homes. And those kids who come to us, those young men and young women, have challenges sometimes that are beyond the scope of the office, what it can deal with. And we take a moment to thank the School Board of Education for supporting that cause in your most recent, or one of your most recent decisions to purchase or the services of a behavioral specialist. Know that this office looks at that as an opportunity to help students, not to eliminate work. But with that being said, my partner, Ms. Smetana, one of my other partners, isn't here. She's the founder of the document you have in front of you, the HOPE Mentoring. When she was hired or going through the hiring process, I was part of that committee and walked up to her after that interview and said, whether you work here or get hired here or not, we need to communicate, connect, because of that mentoring program you have for students. We need that. That drive, that initiative she had and has is what brought this to be. So I take a moment to speak on her behalf. And though I'm co-ing it with her, as I said to her, she's the brains, I was telling students, and I'm the brawn, because the kids know me, but she's got the knowledge. So this is all Ms. Smetana's work as far as putting it in place, and it's her and I as a team making it happen. It's been so exciting. In a nutshell, just to have the communication with the parents whose students are participating in it. We're not tutors, as I was told by Mr. Herbeck. You don't know anything about physics, John. You don't know anything about AP, whatever. He goes, you're there just to get those kids and hold them accountable and remind them of the resources available to them. We have 33 staff members working with 33 students beginning February 5th. Myself and Ms. Smetana, and some of the quotes are below, working with students, and I've asked them why. Why did it work? Someone held me accountable. Someone reminded me, someone nudged me. It wasn't my parents yelling at me. We were sending the same message, just from a different lens. And that opportunity, we're looking at literally just imploding it next year and bringing it to the next level. We're reaching to those students who were mentees to ask them how we can strengthen it. Some have asked/begged us. We know it's only for sophomores, but can we stay on? That's real exciting. And we're reaching to our mentors and asking them for that also, because they had responsibilities. It wasn't just signing up. The document you have in front of you, it was pretty structured. I know what I'd like to do. She knew how to do it, Miss Smetana. She put it together. She structured how students were held accountable, the weekly meetings, the contact with parents, the parents literally in tears in your office saying, thanks, I didn't know what to do. The student finally saying, I know I needed to, but I was tired of hearing it from my mom. The one young lady just said, I just needed someone to believe in me. There's so many testimonies I could go on with, and then it was the teachers that were critical and the staff members, both support staff, administrators. If I may, Dr. Skinkus was a mentor. And we had staff across the board. The gentleman on either end of me were mentors. So it wasn't just staff, but those who took it on. When they weren't signed up and a student asked for them, they signed up. So we're really looking forward to next year. You only want those who want to be there. So it was tough when we had kids that we thought would belong in there, and like we said, it's okay. There's no commitment. The only commitment is when you're in, be with us. When you want out, it's okay to step out. But when you're with us, you're on. It's game on. And that's what made it work. So there was no commitment of time once you sign up, though there were sheets parents had to sign, students had to sign for commitment, but this program did what it said. It did help others pursue excellence by empowering them. So if there's questions, I can answer those. But once again, Ms. Smetana, I'm speaking on her behalf. The other 2 points I'd like to do, if we can look at the suspension report, the board suspension 2011-12, 2012-13 report. The amount of data we can collect in the office, and I turned to Mr. Dugetti just before I walked up here and I said, should I bring the folders I brought with me that shows where we got this from? He's like, no, leave them there. The office right now is inundated with the amount of data that we're able to collect from Skyward. Now you might say, how does that help us? A number is great. A number isn't the person. It's the person behind that number that we need to reach to. The numbers are good for us to determine whether the interventions are working and when our spikes are occurring. That's critical for the office so we can be proactive. Now, how do you be proactive year to year? Well, if you look at your data, and we all have it in front of us, you'll see spikes at certain months. It's somewhat consistent and maybe not in some cases, but we know that kids are coming in from summer not acclimated to school. And we know that we need to be proactive with that. We know that coming back from the break in December, the same occurs. But then we have to look and break down who is receiving those. Are they regular education students? Are they students who are transferring in that aren't as acclimated to it, to the building and the structure we have here? Are they special education students with special needs? So sometimes data can be very skewed. You can have one student have 8 suspensions, and you might say, well, why is that student still in the building? Well, the type of suspensions might be special needs, and there was a question asked, and I know I'm kind of all over, so stop me at any time, is why did the numbers change from days? It's the interventions we're using. It's keeping kids in the building. And Neil will speak to it, Mr. Dugetti will speak to it at the end of this session, is the positive behavior system that we're putting in place school-wide. And so we're looking at a lot of things. When we're looking at, the key for us is not just suspensions, but the recidivism. How many students are repeating? Student may make a mistake. So for example, in 2012, we had 62 single suspensions. 62 students were suspended one time. In 2013, we had 66. So up a few. So we had multiple days for 39 last year and 37 this year. Those are the kids we're trying to hit.
Is that in the chart, John?
I'm sorry, sir?
No,
that is not in your chart. We broke that down after this was put out.
Okay.
And so we're breaking down, and then we're breaking that down even which students are special needs students. And so that even skews the data immensely. But it needs to be in there so that we can look at it, and then we turn it over to the intervention team at Student Services and at Special Ed. Mr. Sibley will speak to it briefly. He attends meetings twice a week with the Student Services Department where they discuss both behavioral and attendance-related students that are having issues with both of those. the really powerful statement that this board has not had to experience in 3 semesters is an expulsion. The message that with Pam and her interventions and the approach that Pam and I are having and school-wide we're having with the PowerPoint presentations and the staff in the classrooms is critical. They're literally, it's not just an office doing this, it's the staff, the relationships with students. And that's how we began this conversation. Kids are believing it, they know it, they trust us. There are kids that are being suspended, no doubt. There are kids that are being arrested, no doubt. There are kids that are, you can look, the numbers are there. There's discrepancies, there's spikes. For example, if you look at drug possession, it went up. But now one student last year who was suspended this year. So what does that tell us as an office? It tells us that it's in the world, there's drugs out there, and we don't accept anything. 3/4 of those students were under the odor of, no possession. The handbook states if you come in under the odor of, you are suspended. And all of the suspensions were for marijuana. And I'm not minimizing the seriousness, but that's pretty significant for us. We're getting a message about prescription drugs and drugs of any other nature other than marijuana. We're learning a lot, we're educating a lot, we're talking to kids, and it's about relationships, and it's about what we're doing proactively. And so what I'd like to do is, and I don't want to rush through this at all, because this data is critical for us, because right now, what I'm doing right now with Mr. Dugetti and Mr. Sibley in my office is literally the multiples, where there's double digits for offenses, we're breaking that data down so that we can see the students, where they're getting them. If they're multiple offenders, we're breaking that data down so we can be proactive and being on the front end when they come back, start hitting those kids and communicating with those students. Because what we do is we create a sheet. And that sheet is for us in this office that we can show this year you had this many suspensions, this many cuts, this many tardies. And when we're having conversations with those families and those students, it's in a proactive way. How are we going to change that behavior? So we're not waiting to react, but for what it's worth. Are there any questions on the suspension report specifically? I know there was one because last year we changed the number of students from 145, I believe, 142 to 101. Let me explain why that change occurred.
It's down on the bottom.
Yes, it is. It's on the total suspension. Students, 101. The initial was 145. Here's why. If you look at the column in red, where it says offenses 2011-12 on the far right, the number in parentheses, we tallied all that up. That was an inaccurate way of tallying the total number of students. If one student, let's just say, had 10 suspensions, which they didn't, that means they were in 10 different categories. So when we counted them initially, every hit was counted as a separate student. Mr. Sibley found that, and we were scrambling. We just said this is not correct because our suspension report showed 101. But the total here, when we added it, was 142, and that's where it was at. And so that's why there's a reduction from 175 for this year to 103. Now you might say, why are they repeats? Why are they multiples? Some kids are struggling with issues that are well beyond the scope of this office. This office deals with discipline. This office is, in a sense, punitive. But it really isn't totally, but it's punitive. So we reach out.
So if we looked at the bottom left-hand corner where it says offenses, there were 211 offenses committed by 103 students.
That is correct.
Which resulted in 425 days of suspension.
That is correct.
Okay.
The difference was, in the previous document you received earlier in the week, it said it had a number of 175 students, not 100.
So the one question that would come up just from maybe somebody looking at this would be that although our offenses increased in 2012-13, our student number stayed pretty consistent, yet our days dropped by 60 days.
Correct.
That could be two things. One, other interventions so that we did not have to suspend for as long of a period of time, which is good, keeping kids in school, helping with our ADA. But the other thing is there was also maybe less serious infractions which did not result in 10-day suspensions or larger suspensions, correct?
It's all that, and it's your leadership. Because we started with you saying, if it's a 10-day, we're bringing them for expulsion. If it's a 10-day, it's serious. And so all of our 10 days have either been outplaced, and they may have been special needs students, or students that did have to have issues beyond us. And I'm very serious. I'm saying the 10 days because this office knew that it's a 5-day, and then we're embedding interventions in there. So it wasn't like this way to just lower the number by just saying no more 10 days. It was no more 10 days, so what are we doing beyond that? If you send someone out for 10 days, academically, they're destroyed. To capture something 2 weeks, to catch up on a math curriculum or something that builds upon, it's just, you're done. And we heard that from you from day one, and that's the truth. That's not the only thing here. Student services. It's the interventions in there. That team has been awesome with what they're doing. And having Mr. Dugetti, his target group being the freshmen. His target group is the freshmen. That group was what his focus was. Though he would help us with others, freshman issue comes in, boom. It automatically goes to Mr. Dugetti when he was in there. He's in there 2 periods a day in the office. And so we're getting tighter as a team on what we're doing and who we're doing it with, the students. And they know we're real. So you'll see spikes, and then Mr. Sibley will speak to truants, attendance, and whatever. It's because we have gotten the system down with a security team where you're in the halls, we're not playing. And when you do it with dignity, but we're not playing. So it's been a real exciting year. We've really had some great celebrations. And for me, and I know they speak the same, and as a board, the no expulsions to disrupt the child's life is so enormous. But we have a lot of issues we're dealing with. We're a high school. So I can talk forever on this. This is what I live, but I want to first ask if there is any questions on this, and then I want to turn over some of the questions that were presented to both Mr. Dugetti and Mr. Sibley.
Do you have any, done any analysis on the increase in the insubordination and noncompliance? That's notable, they doubled.
Yeah.
Is that because you're holding people to higher standards, or what's going on there, if you know?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Dugetti. The answer is yes to that, and we have, it was kind of interesting how we continue to look at the offenses and what they really are. And do they belong separate, do they belong together? But yes, that is exactly what's taking place. That we are having staff address them as like never before, in the sense of not, oh my God, we're going crazy, but no, you don't do that. And we're trying to address that in a serious way. You're right, it's doubled, pretty much. And it's interesting if you look at the breakdown of those individuals, and I don't know if I brought that with me, as far as the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. A large percentage are those who've left. So sometimes kids don't understand their actions are disrespectful and insubordinate. And our job is to educate them and hold them accountable to that.
Neil, was there any data breakdown on that? I think he said you were...
On the specifics data, there was not an actual data analysis. What we looked at is how many of those repeaters. So a lot of times unfortunately, it was the same student making the same bad choice. And a lot of it also is when teachers write the referrals up, they might have chosen a different category. And so then we would see the referral and we'd say, it might have been a little bit worse than a minor infraction. This is a pretty serious thing. You don't swear at a teacher, or you don't, do something, you don't go ahead and touch another student, one of those things. And so maybe educating teachers on how to write the referrals. And as you said before, we've kind of upped our standards on what we expect from the students as well.
Neil, if I look at offenses total offenses, how is it skewed by year? Yeah, I know that you're directed by freshmen. Are we seeing a lot more freshman offenses because it's
No, we're actually down on freshman offenses pretty significantly from the last 2 years. We're down a lot. When it comes, can I grab this?
Yeah, you can take the top one because I actually have some data on that.
And so when we take a look at the offenses, typically what happened this year is in our ADA room, we had a very strict policy of when you're in ADA.
What's ADA?
Our alternative detention room.
So that's an alternative to suspension.
Right, it's our in-school room, and typically that's a 1 day. And so what we decided to do this year is when you're ADA, there's no talking, there's no cell phone usage. You're there to get your homework done. There's no sleeping, and so we really, as John likes to say, we beefed it up. And so we had to get our hands dirty a little bit this year, and we had to call students out on saying, hey, you know what? You have your cell phone out. Give me your cell phone. No, I'm not going to give you my cell phone. Well, unfortunately, now you're non-compliant. So you went from being in school, now you unfortunately have to go home for a day. So that's where we've kind of increased in offense. So that's where we've had a little bit of an issue. But since we've done that, and Dave can attest to this, the ADA room has gone very smoothly, especially fourth quarter. Students that when they are in ADA, it is there to get your homework done. It's not a playtime. You're not there with your friends to mess around. So
So
that's one area.
if the ADA room is becoming more and more effective, next year we should see less
Drop.
students hopefully repeating, because once they have to do a
Absolutely.
day of in
Kids
school.
don't like being in there.
No, they do not like being in there.
They do not like being in there.
We have signs
Right.
posted for the kids, so they know what the expectations are for the ADA room.
It's not a good place.
And our supervisor does an actually very good job of getting memos out to teachers, so those students have their homework brought down to them, so they're not missing any
And
classwork.
that's why our suspendable days have gone down, because we use that in-school room in lieu of suspensions. As John said, you're gone one day, I teach science, you're gone 3 days. It's really tough. You gotta come back. It's not just one class you miss, you're missing 7 classes.
And students' attendance in ADA, if they're there for the whole day, counts still as a day of attendance?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and they
Yes,
get
sir.
that homework from the teachers.
Dave, can you speak to, the ADA has changed. ADA was just, you're in a room, no accountability academically. Dave, Mr. Sibley turned that around. Could you speak to that briefly? Because that's critical, the academic component of it.
Yes, with the academic component, I email all staff the night before, so they're aware of what students are gonna be in ADA. And then with that, they send homework down. And then also, we have staff members, a security team basically goes around and helps get specific assignments for students. We allow students to take tests in there, we monitor the test, the students are just sitting in a room, they're quiet, they're doing their homework. They're not on their cell phones, they're not communicating with each other. They need to go to the washroom, we let them go to the washroom. We take them as a group, we take them to lunch, and then we bring them all back. They stay in the room all day.
There's a form that each student has that the ADA supervisor signs off on as far as assignments. So it's totally accountable. And it's a productive room, but it's not a pleasant place. There's no talking, it's totally silent. And it needs to be, because it is their alternative to being suspended. Some kids have said, don't even put me in there, send me home. And we're like, nope, you're going in the ADA. Now, when you get a kid in there who's disruptive, then you have to remove them, because obviously, when you're in there, it's a challenge. It could be a challenging group of students. There's a reason they're in there. And that can skew your data for insubordination and noncompliance.
Noncompliance.
There's been, I think it was 16 ADA suspensions, I believe, for noncompliance. Don't quote me on that number, but, excuse me. Yeah, I have 18 of the 18 suspensions for ADA this year, for noncompliance.
And that was during, if you take a look and you see in January and February, we had a pretty busy 2 months with suspending students. But we took a stand. We said, this is what the teachers want, this is what the supervisor wants, we need to do this.
And here's the really great thing, and I mean this genuinely, those students we've suspended will sit with us and in a sense, break bread, sit with us and understand what they did. They're struggling with their decision-making. When I say break bread, I mean they're not disrespectful students. Now, you might, how do you suspend someone for noncompliance and insubordination? There are kids who are challenged with the decision on when they're faced with a task of listening, to be subordinate. And that's something we talk about all the time. First thing when they come to their office, did you swear at the teacher? No, good. Or why? You did, why? You know you're suspended. What do you mean? Well, you're suspended automatically if you swear at a teacher. And so we talk with those kids. And it's interesting when you see those kids and they go, I know, I'm sorry. And some of those kids will write papers for myself regarding why, a reflection paper, depending on the incident, why they did, what happened. It's really, and I know we started this off, it's about data, and it is. The data helps us interact with these kids. And these students are the interventions we have in place, the behavior interventionists, the student services team, it's a team in there. Having Mr. Dugetti work with the freshmen and just continue to hit them consistently. To have Mr. Sibley and a security team. They're not walking the halls. They're doing so much more than that. It's really it was an exciting year to see the interventions and what lies ahead by using the data, but the data doesn't truly reflect the climate of the building, and it's been a real exciting, it's a great team here. And Neil's addition, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how we did it without him. It's the truth.
Now, on Saturday suspension, when they have to serve Saturday, do we follow the same discipline?
Oh, yeah.
For
It's even
Saturday,
tighter.
yes.
Yeah.
I had to suspend a couple students this year for misbehaving in Saturday detention. I mean, it was just blatant non-compliant behavior. Our number for Saturday detentions are above 50%, and that drives sometimes how our numbers in ADA get to be higher because they don't serve Saturday detention. Their next step is progressive, would be the ADA. So,
Can you go back? How do you get into, just in a brief snapshot, you start off with the detention. If you're caught in a hall sweep, you get a lunch detention. You don't serve your lunch detention that day.
Hall sweep would be.
Hall sweep, if you're tardy, if you're not through the threshold of a door by the time that bell rings.
Yeah.
And if we're in that hallway and we're all over, you receive that day lunch detention. You don't serve the lunch detention, you get a Saturday detention. You don't serve the Saturday detention, you get an in-school suspension. You don't get it, if you don't serve the in-school, you get an out-of-school. What's really been great is these two gentlemen have been on top of that system. You don't fall through those cracks. That's where our numbers are moving.
And I just want, we're not here just to punitively just
No,
get
no.
our kids like every little, we're gonna get you, no.
No.
Ultimately, we want to be in class.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it
So
forces
if they're
the
in
kids to be in
class.
class.
So you're pushing
then
them.
If they're in class, they're good, they're doing their homework. They're doing their homework, they're passing, they pass, they graduate. Bottom line, so.
Yeah, we have
Mr.
great kids.
Passarella, I know
Yes.
you're very passionate and love to speak publicly, but I want to make sure we give
You
them
got
the
it.
opportunity to cover the data they want, just in respect of the time.
Neil, or Dave?
Okay.
You had some questions?
With the
Couple board
tardies, the number for this year increased from last year. But
So
the
we're
num-
looking at which chart?
We're looking at.
This is Pam, Ms. Bialsma's chart
character
that's
counts
character
data?
counts. This was put by
Mind
Ms.
if I ask some
Bialsma.
questions about the other one before we move on?
This is fine.
Sure, go ahead.
The first one is, it seems like the disrespect kind of, if there's a few categories that you might have been a little harsh on, but the bullying, it's way down. Do you think they kind of relate to each other, that if you expect more to?
Yeah, I'd like to address that, yeah.
Okay.
You're right, I really believe that. And what's happening is, I'm the only administrator who deals with bullying. In my absence, they do, but all those reports come to myself, Mr. Dugetti, and Mr. Sibley, and the student services department. If they're not there, Neil steps in. So it's a consistent application of whether it's the investigation or the discipline. And the kids are getting the message. We're serious about how that's being addressed. So those two definitely have a correlation, 100%. And the bullies are realizing, or excuse me, the bullied realizes there is help out there, and the bullies know it's going to be serious.
The second question, if you look at the dropouts, and I forgot to ask this, but I presume that 2012 and 2012-13 are like fifth-year seniors.
Where are you at?
I'm
For
at
20
the,
Dropouts.
Oh, you're on
Okay.
Pam, yeah.
on the first
I'm
chart
sorry.
you had on
Yeah.
the.
I would have to look at that data. I think we may have lost 2 fifth-year seniors to dropout, but I believe we got some, most of our fifth-year seniors through.
But if you take the 2012 through 15, which 15s would have been sophomores this year, we went from that group from 10 dropouts last year to 18 this year. Is there a reason that our dropout rate went up?
That can coincide with our truancy in trying to get kids to school. I had a couple students that, no matter how hard I worked and no matter what intervention I put in, I could not get those students to school. Parent conferences, truancy tickets, the whole 9 yards, meeting with the parents. And in some cases, the parents are struggling trying to get their student to school. And at a certain point, they miss, for example, I have a special ed student that missed 90 days of school. At a certain point, we have to remove them from the roster. And with a special ed student, they can re-enroll, but we just had to remove them from the roster. We just couldn't have them there.
And is that how do you determine somebody's a dropout?
So when they miss a certain number of days, and after all the interventions that we put in, and there's nothing working, and depending on their age, we will remove them from the rolls.
And they don't transfer it? You've
They do not
determined they didn't
transfer.
transfer to another
No.
school, right? Okay.
Mm.
So building on Tim's, if they've served at this school for a number of days, could they transfer to another school then?
You can always transfer.
You can
sure.
always yes.
Yeah, so yes, 100%.
And we would try to get that information so it wouldn't count against us in the dropout rate.
Any questions, more questions on page 4? If I see none, let's move to page 5.
This is the character counts
Is page
data.
5 that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There were a few questions that Mr. Sibley can speak to.
And this is what I was talking about with tardies. First line, our tardies increased from 2011 and 12 to 2012 and 13, but our numbers of 3 tardies have dropped. So there's a significant number of kids that are tardy, but they're not going beyond that threshold of 3 tardies. So we're sending the message, we're ready to catch them in a hall sweep, and they're getting the hall sweep detention, and we're just trying to force them to class. I have not broken down the data to see what periods they are tardy for, but that's what I'm gonna be doing in the next couple of weeks, to see if it's first period, And usually is, when I run the data for this, it's always first period. When you drop your kids off at school, you see how it is sometimes in the morning, you just can't get here. If there's a train issue up on First Avenue, kids are gonna be late. If there's a flood, the kids are gonna be late. So we're working on that. We just gotta figure out what period it is, and then that way I'll be able to address that next year on certain interventions. Every kid that's tardy or hits that third tardy, they get an automatic dialer phone call home, so the parents are aware that their child is tardy.
I just want to add a couple things with the tardies, since I work with Mr. Sibley on this. 2 years ago, what we did was we created a letter. We sent it out to all the parents that children go to school here, basically talking about the importance of coming to school on time. As Mr. Sibley said, even if you drop your student off at 7:55, they still need to get to the locker, and they still need to get to the classroom on time. So we were kind of, battling with, I dropped my son or daughter off to school on time. However, they're still arriving at 8:02 or 8:03 into the classroom. So we sent a letter out to all the parents so that we can get some help there. As Dave said, we have the automatic dialer. We also made sure we sent out an email to the staff saying, hey, we need a little bit more help in the hallways to push the kids into the classrooms as well. The one reason that there's a little bit of a spike is last year, what we do is we do the hall sweeps first period when they enter. We have the security in the hallways. If you're late, they get a hall sweep detention. When they walked in with that hall sweep detention pass, the teachers were unsure. They assumed they were already marked tardy in the system. So that's why this year we sent out an email saying, even if they come with that hall sweep, they still need to be marked in the system as being tardy. So that's why there's a little bit of an increase this year with the tardies itself. And that was just a clarification, because last year we really made sure we hit that hall sweep detention as an intervention, punitive one that it is. But that's why there was we knew there was going to be a spike this year, and there was, because we were making sure we're getting that data in there as well.
Mr. Passarella, can we make sure next year, as we track this on a semester basis, we add another column that talks about the increase or decrease from one year to the other besides the whole snapshot? I appreciate the 2009 to 2013, but we should be also monitoring annually. And can you address for the board, I know there was a question in regards to cuts, that seems to be a pretty significant increase from last year to this year.
I can address that, Dr. Skinkis. The number of students that were truants was less than last year. There was 893 incidents of kids missing class, but that number has increased to 1,446. Due to the fact that, like I discussed earlier, we had some students that I could not get into school, and that really drove those numbers up. The student that missed 90 days, that's 460 cuts.
Because there are 6 periods per.
7 periods per day, and that will count against us in that. So that's what drove that number up. And I had several.
I think the board needs to hear that, because if anybody was looking at this, they'd say, well, you almost doubled your cuts.
We're breaking that apart.
Yeah, and it was only a few students, and I had one that missed 90, and I had one that missed close to 60, and trying to get them up, and that really drove that number up. And I'm doing all the interventions and working. And while we're speaking of that, we had a question about why the truancy tickets went up. It's that these students were receiving truancy tickets as an intervention to get them in front of the judge and have the judge give them community service hours, have a good stern conversation with those students, and get them back into class. In some cases, court is very efficient for these kids. I have had kids that have been issued tickets and they don't miss another day. And some kids, as we say, that we can't help all of them, they look at it and then I have to issue them another one, we get them in, and then we up the ante a little bit.
Could you explain? I didn't realize that we had the authority to issue tickets and
I
send
do not, I call
kids to-
Riverside Police Department.
Oh.
If they're
and
truant, it's
if
a
they're
village
truant,
ordinance.
It's a village
So the
ordinance.
police would issue a ticket?
The village
Okay.
issues a ticket, and then I go and represent the school in court.
I got you.
Interestingly enough, I think we had more this year than ever before, both Brookfield and Riverside law enforcement seeing our students wandering around, just bringing them in.
Oh.
And at that time, Mr. Sibley, truancy ticket, they're truant. Parent, call the parent, they had no permission. And what's really nice is they're not fining these students. They're giving them community service, because who pays the fine? The parents.
Yes.
They're giving these students community service and inconveniencing them. So it's just been another intervention.
And the court system works very well with us.
So we are seeing spikes here and there because of that.
Mr.
You know,
Sibley, want to continue with some of the other
Question?
Yeah, questions.
that you're going to answer?
Go to truancy tickets.
Yeah, that's, the spike in truancy tickets, like I said, was due to the fact that we had more more students that were missing more days, and we had to put that other step in as an intervention. And like I said, the court system works fantastic with us, and the village attorney works really well with me also on how to handle these students.
You know, the other questions were on the lower portion, discipline infraction. Were there any other questions on the upper two-thirds, upper half?
Why don't you go through those questions, and we'll take the whole sheet then from there.
Yeah, I believe the 1, 2, 3, and 4 bullets or questions were addressed, if I'm not mistaken. Keep in mind, suspensions are indicated on this document by periods, 3,000 periods. You can break it down to days, dividing it by 7, obviously.
With the question with the drug possession and use, there was an increase. Dave Sibley and myself, we've 2 years in a row now, we've gone to conferences on drug trends and what to look for. We just went to one this past year. It was in Skokie, and it was a presenter, and he talked about all the new drug trends that are out there and what students or kids are doing using drugs, using look-alike drugs just to be under the influence. We actually just added into the handbook. I wish I had this.
Statement.
A statement, thank
To
you.
address that.
To address the look-alike drugs that you can get off the internet and how scary it is. And it's completely easy to go on the internet and purchase drugs. What it allowed Dave and I to do is then to look for these things, look for signs that students might be using them or might be under the influence or have look-alike drugs with them. So that's why there is a little bit of an increase, because we've increased our knowledge on what to look for with students.
It was quite interesting when you had a conversation with a young man or a young lady and didn't realize you knew just what they were doing. The good thing is, it's all under the odor of or under the influence of, and it is about help. That's why last year to this year, like we're saying, over the years, they continue to educate themselves on that, is that we don't have repeats from year to year. And I think the key is with that is the seriousness of, the kids are seeing the impact. A conversation just took place this past week with a young person, basically sharing their experiences this year and in a sense, educating us on how to help students. It's
All right,
been a
any
real-
other questions to this report here?
So when you come back 1 year from now, every one of the students next year is going to be a 4-year character count student. The seniors will be 4, the juniors will be 3, and so on. Might we see some increase or some improvement in the numbers to the students' benefit?
Well, I'll answer it this way. They're human. They're going to make decisions that they might not realize the true impact. So you may see spikes. You may.
I'm hoping that they'll
I
do a
believe-
little less.
I believe, yeah, that the seriousness of the offenses will definitely decrease. I believe the repeats will definitely decrease. I believe the students are buying into what we're offering them, and there's opportunities to get in a groove that genuinely creates success for them. And I believe that. So to answer that, yes, I really do believe that will occur.
And looking back 3 or 4 years, we had them sign the handbook.
You know.
And obviously, every time you sit down with these students, we're opening up the handbook and showing them the paragraph that they're responsible for.
Mr. Welsh, you were there at some of the first situations we had to face as a board. When Pam, Ms. Bilesma came in, we had the signing of the handbook, which we never had in the past. So we continue to strengthen what we do in a proactive manner. Like Neil says, it's not all punitive. It's not all punitive. It's about culture. And you create that by having these parameters and holding kids accountable. So.
And we
And
give
they're
them-
part of the handbook committee also.
And we gave them the little speech at the beginning of the year about,
Each semester we do it.
And we do it
Semester.
each semester.
yeah, so each, as we're moving forward, we're giving them more and more to help them not get in trouble.
Yeah. We have a solid staff that helps
Could you
us.
just give me one sentence on what is forgery on the prior page?
Sure. Forgery is basically, you may in fact have literally signed the teacher's name to a pass. Simple as that. And you're done. So that could be a multiple, because you're misusing passes. So you may have grabbed a hold of a hall pass, a blue hall pass, and written a staff member's name on it, you're done. Or you
Any other
could.
questions for,
Did Mr. Dugetti have something final he was going to touch on?
PBS,
Sure.
what's ahead? Because that was real exciting what you said in a nutshell, what's ahead?
All right, so simply PBS is our positive behavior system. And what it allows us to do is we have 4 components, is the data, the acknowledgement, the teaching, and I do the communication aspect. And what it allows us to do is, as a staff with teachers, Quest, the custodians, cafeteria, they're able to meet with us, whichever component they want to be with, and list any kind of concerns that they might have with discipline or attendance. We then take that, we then meet with the administration, and we might suggest some of the concerns that we have. What we did last year, in 2011, 2012, is we sent out a survey to the staff, and some of the concerns they might have had with RB. And 3 of them was, the first one, cell phones, disrespect to adults, and inappropriate language. As you saw, we did a great job this year with improving disrespecting to adults. Next year, we're definitely going to improve on cell phone usage and inappropriate language. What we did is that this year, we worked with the administration and the teachers came up with a creative way with cell phone usage where it's a acceptable area and acceptable areas where cell phones can be used. We are then going to roll that out to students, we're going to roll it out to staff, so that we'll let that go for an entire year, so then we can actually compare the data from this past school year and this school year. With inappropriate language, if you looked at Skyward, it's gone up a ton, because last year we didn't have that as a category in Skyward. So when we went to go look, I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we doing so poorly this year with inappropriate language? And I looked back, that wasn't even a choice. So when teachers would go write a referral, inappropriate language wasn't a category. It was, so they would put it into as, insubordination or minor infraction. So, and then what we did was, as an intervention for inappropriate language, is we created a video. The students and the staff created a video on inappropriate language, on how it should not be allowed in school. And so what PBS has allowed us to do with the line with the dean's office is we really get to hone in on specific areas that teachers and staff want us to improve on. And so we take our time, we look at that, like cell phones, inappropriate language, disrespect to adults, and we can take a look at that data and say, we're still not improving what is going on. So then Dave, John, myself, we take a look at it. But truly, we've got 4 security guards who do a tremendous job with all those 3 things, because we include them as well in part of our daily going through the halls and make sure the kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Same with the staff. They do a great job as well with being involved in PBS. We'll have a better understanding next year once we take a look at the data and we compare the two and how well PBS is doing. But so far, the staff are really excited about it because we're able to focus in on a few areas. And the students seem like they're into it too. The seniors this year were kind of like, well, what is this PBS thing? But the freshmen and sophomores really kind of had a nice little handle on it, and they were accepting of it, and they enjoyed doing it. But I know going forward, next year, we're going to have even better numbers with discipline, and we'll have even better comparison data for you next year as well.
Beautiful.
Thank you,
Any other
guys.
Can
questions?
you explain what are you gonna do different with cell phones?
What we were going to, here in a
If you
nutshell.
know, I mean.
No, here's basically the thing. Students will say, I didn't know I couldn't use it here.
Okay.
I didn't know I could use it here. And so we're saying is we're giving our parameters saying, you're able to use it in the hallways during passing periods. You're able to use it in the cafeteria. You're able to use it in the library. But when it comes to the classroom, it is not an acceptable area. And so now, if, let's say, Dr. Skikas has a cell phone out in class. Dr. Skikas, why is your cell phone out? This is a non-acceptable area. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll put it away. That's your first warning. If it becomes a continual issue, Ms. Skikas, I just want to let you know really quickly that your son is continually taking out a cell phone. We need to have a conversation about your son. Can you help me out with this so he no longer takes a cell phone out in class? And now we have some comparable data that our numbers have dropped. We still in students using the cell phones in the classroom.
The other question I was going to ask, it seems like your group, and by the way, we're going to have at least one additional security person next year, right,
Correct.
Kevin? But it seems like your group has a pretty good pulse on the students. So you have the feel for the incoming seniors, juniors, and sophomores. So then at the beginning, do you have to spend your time kind of introducing yourself to the freshmen and the transfer students? Is that
It's
kind of how it
interesting
goes?
you said. Neil, like we said, it's his target group, the freshmen. So Neil can address how he begins that, but yes.
Well, what I typically do in the beginning with the freshman itself is I visit all the freshman classrooms. I make sure, and I have a relationship with the freshman teachers who typically have all freshmen. And so I'm always popping into the classroom and just saying, hello to the kids, do you have any issues? Are you involved in the activities? And we're always pushing. You gotta be involved in the activities. If you're involved in the activities, you're less likely to make mistakes in the classroom. You're less likely to make mistakes in the hallway. So we're always pushing. We're always involved with the freshmen. And so now, my third year down there, so these, when I first started down in the Dean's office, they're now gonna be juniors this year. So hopefully that these philosophies that we wanted to push on these students by the time they're juniors, they're no longer making those mistakes that they just weren't knowledgeable about as before they came here.
And how do you get to know the transfer students?
That's a little tougher,
Okay.
because it depends on when they transfer in. If it's at the
Okay.
beginning of the year, we have a better handle on them.
Okay.
We had one student transfer in this year who was a freshman, and as kind of the whole year gets going, you're really busy, you got dances, you got games to go to, you sort of miss students unless they come up on the radar. And that typically, teachers will bring it up. They'll say, just so you know, something's going on with this transfer student, he doesn't seem very involved, he's kind of pulled away. And the specific transfer student I'm thinking of, he no longer actually goes to school here, because he made a really bad choice outside of school that's, he's dealing with right now. So that was a freshman student who, was a transfer, but I think he was making bad choices before he even came here, unfortunately.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. You've done a great job. Keep it going.
Well, and a comment, John, we know you're everywhere, because all of us were at graduation, and we heard testimony that you and your team are everywhere.
As you said, the key team.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Good job, John.
Thank you very
Good job,
much.
Dave. Good job, Neil.